Timeshift, the sci-fi first-person shooter that time forgot. Releasing in 2007 for Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC, I will be discussing this title 17 years after its release and sharing my thoughts on it. One of my biggest issues with this title was a very odd button layout, and I don't recall seeing an option to customize it. My issue primarily lies in this specifically. You press down on the right joystick to aim and LT to use a weapon's secondary fire for most guns. But on other weapons you used LT to aim or to zoom in. This threw me off quite a bit and caused me to fumble on occasion, as I'd be using one weapon that required me to press LT to aim, then I'd swap to another that required me to press the joystick. It got a little frustrating if I'm being totally honest. With my number one issue out of the way, let's discuss a positive I have for this game, the weapon variety. I can't say Timeshift has a huge arsenal, but it did have some cool weapon designs, like the scatter gun, or shotgun, and this title probably has the coolest looking crossbow I've ever seen in a game, and it was probably also my favorite weapon to use as a whole. You can hold 3 weapons total, but playing on the medium or skill difficulty, a lot of the enemies in this game were just bullet sponges, and could take upwards of half a magazine to kill if you weren't going for headshots. Timeshift has a pretty fair enemy variety. You started off with just basic soldiers, some of which wore armor, but you'd later get heavy armor specialists, jetpack enemies, snipers, teleporting enemies, enemies with energy shields, and enemies that could move really fast, so you definitely had to utilize your suit's time-altering powers. What are these powers, by the way? Well, you have 3 in total. Slow time, which slows down the world around you and technically makes you move faster. You also had a power to freeze time completely and a reverse time power. All of these are pretty self-explanatory, although the time freeze had a secondary effect that could sometimes be used to refill your health really fast. I think it was kinda glitched though, as it only sometimes worked, but whatever. The suit automatically selected a suggested power to use based off the situation you were in, which would be highlighted on your power meter in the top left corner, which you could press LB to quickly turn on. But you could manually select any power you wanted to use by holding down LB to select the one you wanted. Your suit would also warn you of nearby environmental hazards. While sometimes helpful, it kinda felt stupid at times. It'd be like, incoming threat detected, and then half a second later, before you have time to process what it just said, you'd get hit by a rocket and die. While overall the suit worked well in combat, there were some annoying time-shifting puzzles you had to solve that I wasn't a huge fan of. Kinda messed with the flow of the game. You're all pumped from an intense battle, then you spend 15 minutes getting stumped by a puzzle. There were at least 10 puzzles throughout Timeshift, and I wish there had only been 1 or 2, especially since about 80% of my deaths were from puzzles and not combat. Oh well. There were a couple fun vehicle driving sections with a four-wheeler, and a couple sections where you manned a machine gun on a blimp. Story-wise, this shooter gets a D-. The story barely existed, honestly felt really tossed together, and had a random, abrupt ending. Maybe Timeshift was supposed to receive a sequel, and that's why it had a really random cut-off ending, but to the best of my knowledge, this is the only game in the series. Graphics-wise, this game looks pretty decent for an '07 title. The sound effects were okay, but the soundtrack barely existed. A final note is that sometimes if you shot a gun out of your enemy's hands or took it from them during time freeze, they'd sometimes surrender and you didn't have to fight them. A really nice touch in my opinion. Glad this was added. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. Hosea chapter 6 verse 6. This game took about 7 hours to beat and was worth the $5 I paid for a used copy. Earns a 7.2 out of 10 from me. Do yourself a favor and buy physical if you want to give it a spin though. Used physical copies are generally cheaper than digital sale prices for this game. If you enjoyed Timeshift and are looking for a similar game, I'd suggest Singularity or Jurassic the Hunted. Well, that's all from me, folks. Hope someone enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. For anyone new here, I mostly play, review, and discuss zombie and horror games, with sometimes other topics like today. So feel free to check out some of my other vids if that sounds interesting. Always remember that God loves you all very much. Peace.